Beloved seeker, before we begin, take a slow, conscious breath. Allow your mind to settle, just for a moment. For over 2,500 years, Buddhism has flowed like a quiet river through human history, unchanged in its essence, timeless in its wisdom, guiding millions toward liberation from suffering. It survived empires. It adapted across cultures, yet always remained rooted in the teachings of the Buddha, a path of awareness, compassion, and inner awakening. But every now and then, history introduces a presence so profound that even the most ancient traditions begin to evolve, not through force, not through rebellion, but through gentle transformation. In our time, that presence is His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, a monk who calls himself just a simple Buddhist practitioner, yet speaks to the world's greatest scientists, guides global leaders, and touches the hearts of millions across religions, nations, and beliefs. He did not seek to change Buddhism, and yet, through his actions, his questions, and his fearless openness, he has done exactly that. He brought meditation into laboratories, compassion into political discourse, and spirituality into the language of modern life. So today, dear seeker, we are not merely exploring a person. We are exploring a turning point, a moment where ancient wisdom meets modern consciousness, where tradition meets inquiry, and where Buddhism, as the world once knew it, quietly begins to transform. And the deeper question is not just what he changed, but why. Buddhism may never be the same again. The sacred lineage, who is the Dalai Lama? Dear seeker, to understand how Buddhism has changed, we must first understand the sacred role of the Dalai Lama itself. This is not merely a title, nor simply a position of authority. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Dalai Lama is believed to be the living manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of infinite compassion, one who chooses to be reborn again and again, not for personal liberation, but to serve all sentient beings. Reflect on this deeply. While most spiritual paths seek an end to rebirth, the Dalai Lama embodies a vow to return, again and again, until all suffering is eased. For centuries, this lineage has continued with remarkable devotion. When one Dalai Lama passes, monks begin a sacred search, guided by visions, signs, and deep spiritual intuition, to find the child who carries the same awakened consciousness. And so, in 1935, in a small village in northeastern Tibet, a child was born. At just 2 years old, he was recognized as the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso. Imagine, dear seeker, a child, barely aware of the world, suddenly entrusted with the weight of a spiritual lineage spanning centuries. He was brought to Lhasa, to the majestic Potala Palace, where his life of rigorous monastic training began. But here lies the deeper truth. The Dalai Lama was never meant to be just a monk. He was also the spiritual and political leader of Tibet, a rare union of inner wisdom and worldly responsibility. And it is precisely this unique role that would soon be tested in ways no Dalai Lama before him had ever faced. Because sometimes, it is not tradition that shapes a leader, but the challenges they are destined to meet. Exile that changed the world. Dear seeker, there are moments in history when everything familiar dissolves. For the Dalai Lama, that moment came in 1959. Tibet was in turmoil. Political tensions had reached a breaking point, and the land that had protected this sacred lineage for centuries was no longer safe. At just 23 years old, the Dalai Lama faced an unimaginable decision: to stay and risk losing everything, or to leave and step into the unknown. Under the cover of night, disguised as a soldier, He began a perilous journey across the Himalayas, through freezing winds, through uncertainty, through the silent weight of exile. He crossed into India. Pause here, dear seeker. Imagine leaving behind your home, your people, your identity as a leader, and arriving not as a ruler, but as a refugee. And yet, this apparent loss became something far greater. Settling in Dharmashala, India, the Dalai Lama began to rebuild not a kingdom, but a global spiritual presence. For the first time in history, Tibetan Buddhism stepped beyond the mountains of Tibet and entered the world stage. He spoke in universities, engaged with scholars, welcomed seekers from every culture and religion. What was once a deeply secluded tradition began to flow across continents. And here lies the quiet transformation. Exile did not weaken Buddhism. It liberated it from isolation. Sometimes, dear seeker, when life removes you from where you belong, it is not an ending, it is an expansion, a preparation for serving the world in ways you never imagined, bridging science and spirituality. Dear seeker, now we arrive at one of the most profound shifts, not just in Buddhism, but in the way humanity understands truth itself. For centuries, religion and science have often stood apart, sometimes even in opposition. One rooted in faith, the other in evidence. But the Dalai Lama offered a different path. He asked, with deep humility and courage, if scientific analysis were conclusively to demonstrate certain claims in Buddhism to be false, should we not accept those findings? And then he answered his own question. Yes, we must. Pause and reflect on this, dear seeker. A spiritual leader, willing to question his own tradition in the light of truth. In his work, The Universe in a Single Atom, he invites dialogue between modern physics, neuroscience, and Buddhist philosophy, not to compete, but to complement. Through decades of conversations with scientists, especially in gatherings like the Mind and Life Dialogues, he helped bring meditation into laboratories. What followed was extraordinary. Scientists began studying the minds of long-term meditators, discovering measurable changes in the brain, greater emotional regulation, heightened compassion, deep states of awareness. Suddenly, ancient practices were no longer seen as mystical alone, but as empirical tools for understanding consciousness. And so, Buddhism quietly transformed. It became not just a path to believe in, but a path to test, observe, and experience. Dear seeker, this bridge between inner and outer science teaches us something timeless. Truth does not belong to one system. It reveals itself to those who are willing to explore it with both an open mind and a sincere heart, from religion to universal ethics. Dear seeker, let us now step into perhaps the most subtle, yet most transformative shift of all. What if spirituality was never meant to divide us? What if its true purpose was to unite us in our shared humanity? The Dalai Lama gently reminds us of something deeply simple, yet often forgotten. My religion is kindness, not Buddhism, not rituals, not identity, but kindness. Pause here and truly feel the depth of that statement. In a world where religions sometimes create boundaries, he dissolves them. He teaches that the essence of Buddhism is not about becoming a Buddhist, but about becoming a more compassionate human being. He teaches that the essence of Buddhism is not about becoming a Buddhist, but about becoming a more compassionate human being. He often says, if you find value in Buddhist teachings, use them. If not, follow your own path sincerely. Because what truly matters is reducing suffering. Through this lens, Buddhism shifts from a structured religion into what we may call a universal ethics of compassion, a way of living accessible to anyone, regardless of belief, culture, or background. He speaks not only to monks, but to scientists, leaders, students, and everyday people. And in doing so, he translates ancient wisdom into the language of modern life. Dear seeker, this transformation carries a quiet but powerful message. You do not need to change who you are to live with awareness. You do not need to adopt a label to practice compassion, because in the end, beyond all philosophies and traditions, we meet in the same place, the human heart, and perhaps that is where true spirituality begins. Letting go of power, a radical move. Dear seeker, there is a quiet illusion many of us carry, that true leadership means holding on to power, protecting it, defending it, preserving it at all costs. But what if true wisdom does the opposite? For centuries, the Dalai Lama was not only a spiritual guide, but also the political leader of Tibet, a role that combined sacred authority with worldly governance. To step into such power is one thing, but to willingly step away from it is something far rarer. In 2011, the 14th Dalai Lama made a decision that surprised the world. He voluntarily relinquished all political authority, transferring leadership to a democratically elected government in exile. Pause here, dear seeker. This was not forced. It was not demanded. It was a conscious choice, a choice to align with modern democratic values and to free the spiritual path from political structure. In that moment, a 400-year-old tradition came to an end, and yet, nothing was lost. Instead, something deeper emerged. He showed that spirituality does not need power to remain relevant, that wisdom does not depend on control, and that true leadership is not about authority, but about responsibility without attachment. Dear seeker, this act carries a lesson far beyond Buddhism. In our own lives, we often cling to roles, identities, control. But the Dalai Lama teaches us there is strength in letting go. There is clarity in releasing what we think defines us. And sometimes, the greatest transformation begins not when we gain something new, but when we have the courage to release what we no longer need to hold. The uncertain future. Will there be another Dalai Lama? Dear seeker, we now arrive at a question that is as profound as it is uncertain. For centuries, the continuity of the Dalai Lama has followed a sacred cycle: death, rebirth, rediscovery. A lineage carried not by blood, but by consciousness itself. When one Dalai Lama passes, senior monks begin a deeply spiritual search, guided by visions, signs, and intuition, to find the child who carries the same compassionate essence. But today, this ancient process stands at a crossroads. The world around Buddhism has changed. Political forces, modern systems, and questions of authority have all entered a space that was once purely spiritual. There are differing views on how the next Dalai Lama will be recognized and who has the legitimacy to decide. And then, there's something even more unexpected. The Dalai Lama himself has suggested that the tradition may not continue in the same way. He has openly said that the institution of the Dalai Lama could be redefined or even come to an end. Pause here, dear seeker. Imagine that. A lineage spanning over 600 years, choosing its own transformation, or perhaps its completion. But look deeper. Is Buddhism dependent on one figure, or does its essence live beyond form? The Dalai Lama seems to guide us toward this realization, that truth is not confined to titles, nor limited to institutions. Dear seeker, whether there is another Dalai Lama, or whether this chapter gently closes. The deeper teaching remains untouched. Compassion endures. Awareness continues. The path is still here. And perhaps the future of Buddhism is no longer about one leader, but about each of us, becoming a light of wisdom in our own quiet way. Dear seeker, as we come to the end of this journey, let us return to stillness just for a moment. Take a gentle breath and notice what has shifted within you. We began with a question: how one man could transform an ancient tradition. But perhaps now, you can see more clearly. The Dalai Lama did not change Buddhism through force, nor by rewriting its sacred teachings. He transformed it by embodying its deepest essence, through compassion that transcends boundaries, through humility that questions even its own beliefs, and through a wisdom that embraces both ancient insight and modern understanding. He showed us that spirituality is not something distant, not something reserved for monks or mountains, but something alive within our daily choices, in how we speak, in how we listen, in how we respond to the suffering of others. So now, dear seeker, the question gently returns to you, not as a challenge, but as an invitation. What does compassion look like in your life? Today, perhaps it is patience. In a moment of frustration, perhaps it is kindness when no one expects it. Or perhaps it is simply being present with yourself and with others. Because in the end, Buddhism was never meant to remain unchanged. It was meant to be lived, experienced, and realized. And maybe, just maybe, the true continuation of its legacy does not depend on a single leader, but on quiet awakenings happening in hearts like yours. If this message resonated with you, walk gently, live kindly, and remember, the path begins exactly where you are.